Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Nicholas Samstag, another episode of Mental Health and Business. I have the great good pleasure today of talking with Ryan Hodgson, who's a holistic health coach and who's been doing and is doing some pretty remarkable things, helping young people and helping the rest of us get in touch with things that we've gotten out of touch with. So, welcome, Ryan.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. So you and I spoke just briefly a while ago about what you do and how you got there. But tell our audience a lot about all of that. Where do you come from, and how did you how did you evolve into the current business mogul that you are?
So I think I've always had a bit of I've got ADHD and I've always had it and didn't know I had it. So I grew up struggling a little bit with authority, struggling with focus, and didn't really know what direction I was going in. So I dropped out of college twice and then joined the army, and that helped me grow up a little bit. Um, then when I left the army, I realised I wanted to work for myself, so I set out on this fitness journey and became a personal trainer. And on my first business, I built this fitness business that went from just me being a personal trainer to a 5 location boot camp with 300 plus members,
Mm.
9 plus staff, and a wife with a baby on the way. That I had put so much into that I was just burnt out and I crashed, and my mental health hit rock bottom. And back then, it was like 10, maybe 12 years ago now. No one really talked about mental health, and I always had the thought of this, that's for somebody else. That's not for me. Like I'm a mid-20 tattooed up bodybuilder guy. I don't need to worry about mental health. Like that's not for me. And I really struggled. And I think everybody was getting the good me, apart from Ellie and my baby. And I remember May was a toddler at the time, and I was on my bed, and I remember because we lived in an upside down house, and it's so strange. But she came up, and I was miserable, and I heard her run off to Ellie and say, "Mummy, why is Daddy always sad?" And
Oh, oh,
something just hit me, and I was like, "This isn't right," because that wasn't what I wanted. The two most important people in my world were Ellie and Aoife May. Now it's my other daughter as well, but they're the most important people. But they were getting the burnt out, depressed me. Everyone else was getting this persona that I'd put on. So I knew I needed to do something to change. And I was like, what do I do? Where do you start? And it just so happened that I was running a white collar business at the same time where we were doing white collar boxing, that we were raising money for Mind Jersey. So I knew the sort of MD of Mind Jersey, and I was like, look, I'm a bit embarrassed to talk about this, but I think I need help. So
mm,
very, very grateful that I was then put into contact with um, a therapist, and I went through, must have been about 15 weeks of 2 or 3 times a week. Then it dropped down to one a week. Then it was like once every month, and then I've probably been
mm,
about 8 or 9 years now not needing any therapy. But it helped me come to terms with, it wasn't there's nothing wrong with me, just I had
right.
a different way of thinking, and it was how do I dissect that at the time. And I remember I had got to the point where I knew I was getting better, that I could talk about this, and I said, I'm going to talk about it at my event. And she was like, you don't need to do that. And I was like, no, I want people to know that I've suffered and it's okay to suffer. And as long as you don't suffer in silence, you get help. So I
Mm,
then got up and in the ring before the event, and I spoke about it. And I think that night I had at least 10 guys come up to me that I'd given them confidence to go and talk to somebody. And I think that that's when I realized that mental health is something that we all need to be aware of. And it's something that everybody's aware of. Physical health, people do things as a preventative measure to look after their physical health, but they're not doing things for their mental health. And I look at the way society is now, I actually think there's more triggers to worsen mental health than ever before. But we almost want to like think, I'm not, that's not for me. And I'm like, mental health's for everybody. It doesn't mean we have good or bad mental health. It just means we need to be aware of it, like we are our physical health. And that's where I then realized, when I was at sort of one of my lower points, was like, I don't want to do this anymore with my fitness business. And I remember I sent Ellie a message, and I didn't realize the way it was read at the time. I sent her a message like, I can't do this anymore. And it was just that I was burnt out, tired, struggling. It was like 4:30 in the morning. I got up to go to work because I was burning the candle at both ends, and then gone on with my clients. And I had something like 36 missed calls off Ellie in the space of about that, say 45 minutes of her waking up because she thought I'd gone to do something stupid. And I'll
Wow.
never forget the relief on her voice when I rang her back, because she was just petrified at home with a baby, thinking like I'd done something. And that was never, it never crossed my mind. I always remember when I first went in to get help, are you at risk of taking your own life? You ever thought about it? It's like, no, that's not,
Right.
that's not what it was.
Right.
But I realized that that's how bad things were. So I then realized it's not just me, it has an impact on it, and we really need to become more aware of it. I've sort of gone off on a tangent, haven't I?
No, no, that's great. It's I so appreciate your very straightforward, unabashed way of just talking about all of this, because not many people could do that. And I will say, I've been doing this for a while, and you're not the first. You're not the first person who's running some type of successful health-related business whose start wasn't exactly like that. Who stood up at a certain point and said, I need to stop drinking, or I'm anxious all the time.
Yeah.
And because when you do it in the context of being a leader, or someone who's going somewhere, or someone with publicity, however slight or great, that makes an enormous impact. Because one of the delusions that I think we all have is that famous, successful people don't have problems. And
It
it's like,
is, and that.
we all have problems.
Yeah, and I think it's that whole, and this way I talk about there's more triggers to mental health, because I think a big thing is comparison that we suffer with at the moment. The modern world now, everyone's online, and we have this persona. And I was doing it back then when I was suffering. I was putting this perfect highlight reel up on social media, and I remember getting comments from people like, "What have you got to be depressed about? What have you got to feel sad?" I'm like,
Right.
"It's not just some sad." I said, "I don't know what I've got to be depressed about. I need to unfold that and deal with it, but there's not a specific reason. That's just how my brain is tuned, and I'm learning to deal with that and handle it better." But it was one thing where I'd put up pictures and people would probably think I was the happiest person alive, and I should have been. I had everything to be happy for, but should's the most dangerous word in the dictionary.
Right. Yeah, right. I've been shredded to death. I've been shredded to death.
Yeah.
So what was, if you wouldn't mind telling me and telling our audience, what was the therapeutic, let's see how to say this. What were those therapeutic experiences that were most, excuse me, helpful to you? What was most helpful
I
to
think
do?
it sounds mad. I think the very first time I went in, it's a bit of a blur, but I think I probably went in and spoke to this poor counsellor for 45 minutes or an hour, whatever it was, and just cried for the whole time and probably didn't let her get a word in edgeways. But it was the first time I felt like I could release because it was judgment free. I
Yeah.
think one of the biggest things for me back then, I had an ego and I feared judgment. I didn't want anybody to know that I felt weak at the time. Now I realize it was a sign of strength getting help. But at the time,
Of course.
it
Yeah.
was like, I'm weak. I'm looking around when everybody knew where Mine Jersey's lounge was. I'm looking around, checking no one sees me to go in. And, but as soon as I went in there, I felt this release. And I don't even think that they said anything the first time. And it was just knowing that there's somebody there to listen.
Yeah.
Then over time, we then delved a little bit deeper, asked many questions. And I think I never really got to the bottom exactly what was the cause, but I've learned loads of coping mechanisms to improve the way that I look moving forwards, because I'm naturally a negative person. I don't think that's ever going to change. You could give me 100 wins, but if there's one loss, that negative bias is always going to sit with me. I've just
Mm.
learned to deal with it a lot better. I went on a course with one of my old mentors, Paul Moore, called Mindset X, and he introduced me to the work by Byron Katie. So then it started to be questioning things, and I found that that was so powerful because it was a strategy that I could use with everything. And I
Mm.
always remember, like, whenever I started to find I was going to start going down a rabbit hole, I was going to start questioning things, I'd be like, right, is it true? How would I feel about the thought? And I started to unfold these things and find actually a lot of the stuff that goes on in our head isn't actually real. We think it and then it becomes our reality. Whereas if we can start to question it before we allow it to become our reality, we give ourselves more control. And I think that that's probably what helped me. And it wasn't an overnight thing. And this is where
Of
I
course.
talk to a lot of people who I think suffer at times. And I'm like, there's not a quick fix. You know, it's the same as with your body. You don't, if you're 6 stone overweight, you don't lose it in a month and expect it to stay off. It's the same when if you're having any form of mental health struggles, it's not a quick fix, and it's a constant keeping on top of it. You know, it's a constant, like the last couple of weeks, my anxiety's been a lot high. We've had a lot of stresses going on, but now I'm aware of it. I'm able to take a step out and be like, right, I'm noticing the triggers. Okay, my sleep's worse now. Okay, I need to start prioritizing that. Okay, and I might also make sure I get my activity. And I know all of the things that my body tells me I don't want to do, but I know I need to do them because it helps reduce my anxiety.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's so important, so important, and that right, the judgment. I was thinking recently, like, what's the opposite of judgment? I think the opposite of judgment may be curiosity.
Yeah,
You know, like being like if you're curious about someone or yourself, then you can't really be judgmental. And so many people don't go into therapy until you and I talked about this, until they're really suffering and things are really falling apart. And
yeah.
that's typically not the case, as you say, physically. Like nobody, I don't know, I don't think that many people come to you if they, they can't walk out the door.
No,
Uh,
exactly.
yeah,
And I always say this, I do think like everyone would benefit from some form of therapy or some sort of emotional mental support, because I do think it's a good thing to have. It's like a whole judgment free area where we can, because whether we like it or not, I do think we're constantly being judged for good or for bad. It does happen, but it's like, how do we deal with that where we know we can go into an environment that's safe to us, where we can release these things? And I do think it's a valuable thing for pretty much no one would lose time from investing in therapy of some sort.
yeah. So tell me, what do you enjoy doing the most in your job?
I think it's seeing people go from, I think it's seeing like the emotional transformations in them. So like I coach on like 6 pillars, if you like, and like stress, sleep, mindset, habits, nutrition, and exercise. And a lot of people think, oh, he's a fitness coach, it's all about fitness. And the fitness side is important, but I always think it's a byproduct of the habits that we're making. So it's when I
Mm,
see somebody that has gone from their low in mood, often they do have some form of anxiety about, whether it be about work, body shape, whatever's going through their mind. They have a lot of negative thoughts, questioning going on in their mind, and I help them
mm,
problem solve over time. And it's not even about me trying to be a therapist. It's just like, let me give you some habits that will break the cycle. And then when I see that change, and then I hear about the positive impact it's had on their family, that's magic to me. It's like when I hear from them, it's like, oh, do you know what? I'm feeling more present with my kids when I'm having my breakfast, or rather than sitting on the sofa in the Sunday afternoon, we're out running around, jumping in puddles with the kids because I've got more
mhm.
energy. You've given me that. That's the type of thing I love. I
That's
think
great.
the modern man has so much pressure on themselves, like to perform financially, to perform for their family, to perform physically, and it's a challenge to juggle it all, and especially if you're somebody who wants to push with your career. Often we
Right.
think it has to be at the sort of cost of other areas of our life, and I'm like, no, it doesn't. And that's why we've got like 4 B's, we call them. So like, you've got your body, which is the physical health, your brain, which is your sort of mindset, emotional well-being, your besties, which is the relationships, because they're key to our life as well. And then you've got
Mhm.
your business, which is your like careers and finance. And if you can sort of become aware of all 4 areas, you don't have to focus on them all. But what you don't want to do is think, I'm going to jump on this and get fit, so I focus on the body side, but then the other side of things slip backwards because we've not given it any thought.
Well, that's so smart. That's so great. You haven't used the word, but you're describing integration, right? You're describing balance.
Yes.
And I think one of the things that that's news to a lot of people is that balance. There's not one size that fits all for balance, right? It's
No,
like
100%.
your sense of balance and my sense of balance are not going to be the same. But to be able to cultivate that sensibility, to recognize the 4 Bs, which I love. I love that, the 4 Bs. To recognize that is great, but then also to recognize that you really have to custom. you have to curate it. You have to
Yeah.
custom design it for you, and to develop a kind of psychological fluency that allows you to, train harder on Thursday and take it easy on Friday. And nobody can tell you how to do that at a certain point but you. That's great. That's so
Yeah,
great.
100%. And I think that part of and I never want to talk down about the fitness industry, but one of the negative points to the fitness industry, it can become a lot of people put so much focus on the physical attributes of fitness. Like, you look on social media and it's about this lean body, it's about the six packs, girls with the big glutes, etc. That can have like a negative impact on people's emotional well-being, especially if you're looking at a comparison and you're this busy stay at home mum and you're looking at some fitness professional online telling you just need to do X, Y, and Z. It's like there's that balance, and that's where it is important to sort of gain actually, do you know what? We've all got our own journey, and not everybody's going to look like a fitness professional. That person probably income is reliant on them being in shape. If you're a busy professional parent, your income isn't reliant on you being in shape. Yes, you want to be physically fit, strong, healthy, but you don't need to be to the level that they are. And there is also a lot of people in the fitness industry with extremely unhealthy approaches towards their food and diet. And I've been there myself with it. So I think it's
Hmm.
really important that what people are listening to is balanced. It has to be balanced because long term health is more important than losing a bit of weight quickly.
Yeah, for sure. And how about this? I mean, this is always a fun subject to talk about. That there, it seems like we've been increasingly in this country, maybe the world for that matter, um, slaves to optics. Like we're so obsessed with, metrics, right? Like how I look and how much I win and what do I make and, where
Yeah.
was I seen, and all those things. What do you do with that? Because I suspect there are a lot of folks. I mean, certainly there are people walking to my office who are obsessed with that. I'm sure they come to you too, right? Like they want to be the biggest, the best, the da, 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 da. Like what do you do with that?
I think it's bringing them back. And this is where I have the conversation because I would say most of the clients I work with are what we call high achievers. They're typically very successful at their work. So then they'll often come to me doing nothing exercise wise for many years. And I'm like, right, so what's realistic for you? And 9 times out of 10, they will put on their welcome form. I can train in a gym 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, something like that. And I'm like, okay, so why have you not done that for the last 20 years? If you've got 10 extra hours a week, you've told me you're busy, you've got kids, you've got a social life, you're out with work, you travel with work, you don't have 10
Right.
hours. And then it's often bringing them down a peg. And I think that sometimes it needs an honest conversation with them. And I'm like, you might be able to do that for a week or a month, but I don't want you to do something for a week or a month. I want you to do something forever. So should we
Yeah.
just start with, and then I always get them to start small. And I'm like, I don't want you to compare your day one to someone else's month 20. I want you to just be like, if I can be 1% better each day. And I talk a lot about doing one thing each day that your future self will thank you for. You can celebrate
Mhm.
that day then, and it doesn't have to be big. I think the small stuff done consistently is what makes a difference. And I think I look back to my sort of recovery of my mental health was all about small things. It literally started with little, right, I'm going to make sure, actually, do you know what? I'm going to make sure I wash today. I'm going to make sure, okay, I've taking care of my personal hygiene for a week. Let's implement something new. And it sounds stupid because to somebody who's
Yeah.
never suffered wouldn't understand it. But to me, that
Yeah.
was a big deal. Then it was
Of
like,
course.
right, the next thing, I'm going to go out for a walk. And then I used to avoid town. Okay. The big thing for me was let's get to town where I can be around other people and not feel like I need to just run away. And that
Yeah.
we built on it over time. It's Rome wasn't built in a day.
Yeah. No, Rome wasn't built in a day, right? And you obviously have spent the time and spend the time to do a thorough and sort of sensitive appraisal of what needs to be done, which is rare.
Yeah, and I think another thing. What is important as well is like I will know when to refer out. I think the big thing with coaches in the world is it's knowing when within your realms of professional capacity. And I'm like, I can help someone who's struggling a little bit, but if somebody's really suffering with their mental health, they need somebody who is a specialist in that area. And then I'm like, do you know what? I'm happy to help you with the fitness side of things, but I think you need somebody who's more specific in that area because it can be dangerous otherwise. And I think that's another slant, sort of negative to the fitness world, where fitness professionals think they can coach everybody, and it's,
Mm.
it can't be done like that. We've had it with clients where they've worked with us for a while. We've noticed some unhealthy traits and been like, "Do you know what? I don't think our coaching's helping you right now. I think you might be better." And we refer them to the correct a coach that would be more suited to their personality type.
Yeah, that's so important. That's so important. I mean, that's something, right? That's something that it was certainly drilled into our heads in graduate school. Like if you don't know what you're looking at and you don't think you can deal with it, you have to find somebody who does. Or I don't know if you've been in this situation, but I've certainly been in, not many, luckily, but I've been in hospital situations after accidents or whatever it is, and the chief resident will take a look at you and they'll go, "I don't really know what's going on here. Let me get somebody."
Yeah, and
And
that's it.
I'll go get somebody with gray hair, and then that person will say, "Oh yeah, I've seen this before."
Yeah. And it is, though, I think it goes that, like, it sort of looks down to, like, and it's not talking negative GPs, but it's like you're not trying to be a GP for everybody who comes into health and fitness. It's like, actually, you know what? This is my typical person that I can help. Anyone outside of that realm is probably not the right person for me. And referring them out, it comes back in the long run anyway, because you find that they're like, "Oh, he's a good guy. He didn't just make me join his program when he can't help me."
Yeah,
I'm in this game to help people, and I think that that's the most important. Remembering what the end goal is.
that's right. And I think on the road to healing, one encounters many professionals, medical doctors, coaches, teachers, maybe even people in the army, who pay attention to you, who
Yes.
actually pay attention to you, and don't treat you like just a generic number, but actually say, "Oh, I'm looking at you right now, and this is what I think you need." And unfortunately, we don't get much of that in our parenting experience. And when we do get it, it has an enormous impact. It's like, my God, that guy's great. He actually paid attention.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. So, you seem like a very, very busy guy. What do you do on your days off, if you have any?
I don't really have days off as such because of the way that my business works, but I make sure I have downtime because I know I need it. I've also got an autoimmune disease, so then I get burnout if I don't listen to my body and I don't give myself rest. So I need to make sure that I do take the time out. Yeah, so I would probably say, because I've got clients in different parts of the world, I tend to do a lot of split shifts. So during the day, I get downtime. I make sure that I am properly resting and recovering. But I think from an enjoyment point of view, I just love spending time with my family. That's what motivates me. I've got two daughters, and they're like my everything. And my wife, who's my best friend and business partner, we're that cringy couple who do everything together. So, yeah, I'm very grateful.
How old are your girls?
So we've got Aoife May, who's 10, and Neve, 6.
10 and 6.
Yeah.
Well, I have one who's 21.
Wow.
She's traveling through Europe right now, and
Oh, quality.
yeah, it's so odd to look at her and realize, I was the first one to hold you when you were born. You were the
Yeah,
size of a loaf of bread.
it's mad.
It's great. It's so great. Well, look, it's been great talking to you. What else can you before we forget? Why don't you give your information for our audience so they know how to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so I'm Ryan Hodgson Fitness on all social media platforms. You can get my website is teamhh.co, and you can find out all information on there. If you do message any of my pages, I manage them myself, so I'll always reply to them as quickly as I can.
That sounds amazing. All right, man. Well,
Thank
that
you.
was great. Thank you so much. I hope you come back sometime in the future and we can do this again.
I'd love that. Thank you very much.
All right, Ryan.
Cheers.
This is
Bye.
Mental Health and Business signing up. Thanks, signing off. Thanks for stopping by. All right, that was great, Ryan.